in which the former foreign minister asked a simple question: is it so difficult to be patriotic? The third on point is on the threat to Pakistan's Kharif crop this summer after India's decision to suspend the Indus Water Treaty. And now the headlines. Indiana University sexual assault case, court sentences accused Ganasekaran to 30 years in jail. National Commission for Women takes suo cognizance of rape of minor in Bihar's Muzaffarpur. Sixteen Naxalites carrying a collective cash reward of rupees 25 lakh surrenders in Chhattisgarh's Sukma district. Active COVID cases surged by 13 times near 4,000 mark. Death toll touches 32. After floods in northeast states, military camp in Sikkim hit by landslides, at least 3 dead and 6 security personnel missing. Five arrested over gang rape of minor near Belagavi. Trade tensions hit global air travel. IATA projects 4.99 billion passengers in 2025. Kamal Hassan moves Karnataka High Court against ban of his film amid language row. Karnataka government sets up anti-communal task for 3 coastal districts. In one of the most audacious attacks, Ukraine hit deep inside Russia. Ukraine planned for 1.5 years and took Russian intelligence by surprise. This is reminiscent of a pager explosion conducted by Israel against Hizbollah. The drones were carried 5,000 kilometers inside Russian territory. The name of the operation was Spider's Web, and the experts have the view that the Ukraine could not have planned this audacious operation single-handedly. So what is Spider's Web operation? FPV drones with built-in cameras were smuggled inside Russia in wooden cabin. Cabins were carried inside Russian territory by trucks. Operation carried out by Ukrainian special forces. Trucks parked at nondescript properties. Cabin roofs opened remotely, not manually. Trucks were parked adjacent to 4 Russian airfields. Operation lasted for 18 months. Let me play out the bite of the Ukraine's aviation expert Valery Romanenko.
По-перше, це потужний удар по одному з основних компонентів російської ядерної тріади. Це удар по стратегічній авіації. Удар потужний. Мінімально 4 Ту-95, всі бачили, як вони палають. Є відео. 40 літаків, я не думаю, що всі 40 знищені, деякі ушкоджені. Через 1-2 дні ми побачимо супутникові знімки, можна буде порівняти з результатом.
Now let me take you through more details. 117 AI-powered drones were deployed. Drones were operated remotely, 40 military aircraft were destroyed, Tu-95, Tu-22 and A-50 planes were destroyed. Planes worth $7 billion destroyed. Planes constitute 34% of Russian bomber fleet. Bombers are part of the Russian nuclear fleet. Ukrainians hit bases 6,000 kilometers apart. Russian media termed it as Russian Pearl Harbor. Let me put it on the map and then you'll understand. This was how far the Russian bases were. Ukraine on one side and the bases spread all across the Russian territory. and some of these territories are deep inside Siberia. So imagine that the Ukrainians were able to hit deep inside Russian territory. In a televised address, Ukrainian President Zelensky confirmed 117 drones were used in operation. He said that the operation had been headquartered next to the local Russian security services.
Щойно була доповідь голови Служби безпеки України Василя Малюка. Блискуча операція проведена на території ворога виключно проти військових цілей, проти саме тієї техніки, яка використовувалась в ударах проти України. Дуже відчутні втрати Росії і абсолютно справедливі, заслужені їхні втрати. Дякую Службі безпеки, особисто генералу Малюку, також всім, хто був задіяний в операції. Готували операцію більш ніж 1,5 роки. Планування, організація, всі деталі були ідеально підготовлені. Можна сказати впевнено, що це абсолютно унікальна операція. Найцікавіше, і вже зараз це можна говорити публічно, офіс нашої операції на території Росії знаходився безпосередньо поруч з управлінням ФСБ Росії.
So is this Russia's Pearl Harbor movement? One. Is this akin to what Israel did in Lebanon, like a pager attack? Is this a solo attack by Ukrainians? And if you say it is Russian Pearl Harbor, then what will be the Russian response? These are the 4 questions I ask. And I'm joined by Yulia Sirko, Member of Parliament and Deputy Head, Transport and Infrastructure Committee, live from Kyiv. I'm also joined by Vlada Galan, President and Chairman of the Board of International Ukrainian Crisis Fund. Thank you so much. Welcome back on my show again. And I'm also joined by Lieutenant General Shakin Chawan. Let me straight away go to Yulia Sirko. Your opening comments.
Hello, and thank you for hosting me. I'm talking from Kyiv, and honestly, we all looking at this with amazing, I would say, because it was a secret operation. But as you rightly said, only military targets, mostly bombers, were targeted. Not a single Russian civilian or single Russian kid were injured or killed during this operation. And I think this is the difference between Ukraine, who is targeting only army and only military targets, and Russians who every day bombing Ukrainian civil cities, in civilian infrastructure, as well kids, women, schools, etc. So this is the response for 1,000 of killed Ukrainians, civilian, mostly Ukrainians, more than 600 kids killed by Russians, and 1,000 injured. So this is a clear response, which asymmetrical response, which showing clear message and sending clear message to Russians that will not let them do it with our civilians, and we will protect our land, and we are not going do any concessions.
Okay. Vlada Galan, your opening statement about the Operation Spiderweb and its consequences.
Operation Spiderweb showed the world yet again Ukrainian ingenuity. It's a consistent David versus Goliath fight. Ukraine is going up against one of the strongest, supposedly, militaries in the world. And yet it's able to execute flawlessly an operation over an extended planning period of time. What the Russians bank on is the fact that Ukraine may not have enough soldiers to continue the fight, and they wish to push for war fatigue. But what Ukraine has proven is that we don't have to send in soldiers. We can send in drones and save soldiers' lives. We can be very smart in the way that we fight this conflict. And that was shown by this incredible operation that was rolled out. The Russians also wish to put Ukraine in a much weaker position with, in a consideration of going into talks. And I think these instances.
Okay, I think the Vlada's frame has freezed. Let me go across to General Shakin Chawan. She joins me from Harare. We'll go back to her. Sir, your opening comments on the audacious attack deep inside Russia, sir.
Good evening, Karthik. Thank you for calling me for the show.
It's a pleasure, sir. It's always a pleasure to have you.
The issue about, the question we should be asking is what is its strategic effect? The degradation of long-term Russian long-range strike capability is the first effect that it has. Ukrainian officials, it's right now just confirmed by Ukrainian officials, claim the operation has damaged up to 41 strategic aircraft and intelligence aircraft. Aircraft that were not being made anymore. So that's a very important thing. Tu-95, A-50 radar planes, Tu-22. These are critical assets that Russia is not making anymore. So potentially, these are irreplaceable assets. President Zelensky has said 34% of Russia's strategic missile cruiser carriers have been hit. Now, it shows amazing tactical innovation, operational innovation, but what does it mean for the peace talks? That's an issue that we need to understand. What is the psychological and political impact of this? That's a second issue that we need to understand. The strike has delivered a major morale boost for the Ukrainians, a humiliation for Russia, but in the middle of the peace talks, that might be an issue. What happens when Russia pulls off, and will Russia hit Ukraine even more after this? Would it not be a greater damage to Ukrainian forces? Would there not be a greater problem there? Would not more people die? So the other effect, of course, is something I was reading on X, is the Americans are most outraged about the fact that that President Zelensky did not tell the White House. So is there a strategic ally? Is there not a strategic ally? Is there antagonism? Who is Russia going to blame? Is Russia going to blame NATO, the US, Europe? And what does it mean for the escalation of this conflict beyond Ukraine? So these are issues that I think India is interested in, is how does it affect the rest of the world? What will be Russia's reaction? And of course, the fact is that, yes, Russia has lost 30 to 40% of its assets, but these are not assets that Russia can replace, because today these aircraft were not really flying to do any damage in the bombing of Ukraine. Russia has an immense fleet of attack drones also, and they can utilize that, and they can recoup these issues. These are only assets. But eventually, the point is, how does it affect strategically the peace talks? How does it affect the peace in Europe, peace in the world? And how will it affect the NATO-Russian relationship and the American-Russian relationship?
Okay.
Yeah, that's the issue.
That's the issue. I'll come to you, because there's something even more important, because the Russian press says it's their Pearl Harbor. Madam, my question to you is, Julia, if it is a Pearl Harbor, we are talking about a historical incident which had a stronger American response. That's how the press is saying it's Russian Pearl Harbor. Then then there is a response that is also expected. When you use the word Pearl Harbor, it means a massive response, madam, a counter response.
Yes, we understand it clearly and we expect it, honestly. But you have to understand that every day Russia sends to Ukrainian territory, mostly to civilians, more than 500 drones. So if you think that, and plus for the past months, they sent more than 80 missiles, cruise missiles. So if you think that, more 100 drones more or less will somehow determine the situation, I don't think so. So Russia, basically, they are on the top of their capacities. They cannot, and the destroy of 30% of their fleet, very important, as they cannot replace it. It's a very expensive, and they cannot target Ukrainian cities and homes and civilians. So for us, it's more important than to get a response. There is, as you can see, for past 11 years of war and latest 4 years of war, there is no responses for hard strikes from Ukraine, from Russia. Why? Because they understand only strikes and force. They in general do not understand any other responses, including diplomatic, etc., etc. And look for the latest story between India and Pakistan. And you have to understand that, unfortunately, at some point of time, there is no other response than military and force response.
You know, Vlada, when Yulia Sirko made the point that the Ukrainians have only attacked the military bases and not the civilian areas, something which Russians do it on everyday basis. I understand there's an analogy you were trying to draw from the Operation Sindoor. We attacked Pakistani terror targets, not the civilian areas. But the fact of the matter is, does it have the potential to complicate a peace conversation which is right now happening in Turkey, where your own government officials are present? Vlada?
I agree 100% with you. Strength and force. They do not understand a weaker approach when coming to the negotiating table. And it's evident in the lack of seriousness in their approach to the current talks. They sent a very low-level delegation to Turkey. They're not taking these talks seriously, and they are not showing real progress in any of these talks. The most significant thing that came out of the talks was the prisoner exchange. And while that's wonderful, that is not real progress moving forward when it comes to really bringing peace. You cannot be forced to negotiate peace with a gun to your head. And, you know, the Russians have, you know, refused to do a serious ceasefire. They've refused to succumb to the pressure that even the Trump administration has started putting on them, because he's lost patience for them completely, as the rest of the world has. And this is exactly the kind of strong approach that is necessary. They will only understand force, and that force, unfortunately, has to be where it hurts, and that hurts on their homeland, on their home territory, hitting their bases, destroying their military infrastructure, and making sure that they cannot use those bombers in Ukraine ever again. And it's going to be very difficult for them to recover. They are completely trying to downplay this incident in many, many ways. The Russian government has issued various statements questioning the number of damage done, trying to downplay it, which further goes to show you how much damage was really done here.
Okay, let me play out one more bite of Ukrainian President Zelensky on this entire issue.
We also have stronger tactical solutions. Our Operation Spiderweb yesterday proved that Russia must feel what its losses mean. That is what will push it toward diplomacy. And when Russia takes losses in this war, it's obvious to everyone that Ukraine is the one holding the line, not just for itself, but for all of Europe.
General Chawan, you know, there is one issue which is the current engagement, but there is also another issue. Your assessment, till what time you think that Putin is going to pursue the war? Because ultimately it will boil down to that.
Karthik, I'm afraid my personal opinion is that this will prolong the war. Secondly, it will increase the intensity of Russia's attacks on Ukraine. Thirdly, many more people will die. And I have never seen, Ukraine now, I have never seen Russia succumb to this kind of pressure. So I don't think, and I don't agree with President Zelensky, that these losses are going to force President Putin to negotiate for peace. Firstly, please remember three things. These were strategic bombers, right? Strategic bombers, by the nature of their treaties with NATO, had to be parked outside. And the whole issue between NATO and Russia was that strategic assets would not be attacked. So that's the first issue. You have to understand that NATO has signed on a treaty saying nobody's strategic assets, either the Russians or the American strategic assets, would be attached. So they have to be parked outside. Now, Ukraine has attacked those strategic assets. That means it's an absolutely different kind of war that might be fought from now on. That's what we are afraid of. See, we are not inside Ukraine, so we don't understand probably what's happening to Ukraine at the moment. But all I can say is, from an Indian point of view and from a military strategist point of view, from the world's point of view, this is a damaging strike for peace because it has hit strategic assets. And when strategic assets are hit, the treaty itself might be damaged. You might have Russia abrogating the treaty. So, as you said, Pearl Harbor meant a stronger American response. Pearl Harbor meant that America got fully into the Second World War. And that might just happen now. Russia, after all, was not using its strategic weapon systems against Ukraine. We have discussed these issues earlier too, Karthik. The Russian war effect on Ukraine was much less. If they were to start using the thermobaric weapons now, there would be absolute destruction. And much greater number of people might be killed. So sometimes, while I agree that yes, Ukraine has hit Russia, it's an issue that they feel that the Russians must learn that what it means to suffer after Second World War, after the Russians had suffered the greatest number of casualties after the Second World War. But the eventual issue is, what does it mean for the world? What does it mean for peace? What does it mean for future peace? And what does it mean for a nuclear war?
Okay.
These are the four things I feel we should be looking at all this time.
But you see, there is also one more thing. You know, the Ukrainian example is also like a sordid saga, and I'll try to get Vlada. You know, Ukraine gave up its nuclear weapons. West gave the assurance that they will take care of the Ukrainian securities. It is ultimately the West which ditched Ukraine. They have not shown the commitment. Ukraine does not have the nuclear weapon, and it is standing alone to fight a war. It's almost like the Indian case. We had to go inside Pakistan to teach these Pakistanis a lesson that Kashmir is not a free play, and ultimately only thing Pakistanis did was a narrative war. But in this case, if I draw an analogy, Ukraine is alone fighting its own war. Isn't that, Vlada?
Ukraine is absolutely fighting its own war. However, it has had significant support from the West, but not enough. The biggest mistake that Ukraine made was giving up its nuclear weapons. And the Budapest Memorandum, quite unfortunately, was not worth half of the paper that it's written on. But I disagree to an extent on the fact that this is not going to help the peace talks. It's not going to help or not help the peace talks. This is a show of force in its own way that is going to rattle Putin at home in Russia where it hurts. And I'm not talking only about infrastructure, but Putin survives this war by the public opinion is incredibly high for him supporting this war. He has raised manufacturing in Russia. He purports to have raised the Russian economy, despite the fact we know that that's not true. But when you start hitting a country on its home soil, no matter how much you play a propaganda narrative on television, the citizens of Russia are going to start paying more attention. And that is what hurts Putin. That is what puts pressure on Putin in itself. So it's the byproduct of these attacks, because it has been a few years since Russian mothers have not received even the bodies of their soldiers back. There are bodies still of Russian soldiers in Ukraine that the Russians have not taken back. And it is these women will start asking the question. These mothers and fathers and sisters and brothers will start asking the questions. And that is exactly the kind of change domestically that has to happen within Russia's population to start putting pressure in some ways. I also think you're going to see a significant amount of pressure continue mounting from the West. And I, for one, would personally like to see secondary sanctions take place. I think that's going to put exactly the kind of pressure that we need to put on Russia right now. In addition,
Vlada, how do you account for the fact that Putin is there for life? He's like Xi Jinping. No one is going to remove him. He's like he's immune to the democratic processes. So you are dealing with a person who's there till he controls the armed forces. Doesn't it really complicate the position for Ukraine?
It certainly complicates the position for Ukraine, but nothing is forever. Russia is a massive country with dozens of ethnicities and many, many different religions spread across the board. And Putin has done a very delicate dance to keep all of those regions together and united. But that's not forever. Many of these regions have their own resources. Many of these regions have ambitions for many years to break away from Russia's grasp. And this can absolutely cause exactly the instability that he does not need right now. And I think in part that is also part of Ukraine's hope, is to kind of shake the home front to a degree, to really question the strength of his leadership. When Russia is getting hit on their home turf, that questions the strength of his leadership. Is he a leader that's going to protect the Russian people? Well, it doesn't look like he can protect Russian military infrastructure, and people are going to start asking questions on what is next. And the minute that happens, there are others in Russia that wish to seize power. The question is, will they be worse than Putin? But nothing is forever, and I don't believe that Putin is forever. He has an expiration date, and hopefully it's coming soon.
Colonel Chawan, I have a military question for you. You know, the drone warfare, people are aware, Armenia, Azerbaijan, Ukraine, Russia, Operation Sindoor. But the sort of thing which the Ukrainians have done, it's a completely different ball game. You know, they had parked these AI-powered, camera-enabled quadcopters deep inside. So imagine if there is a war which is going to take place in future, and suddenly there are 500 trucks parked in nondescript areas, and suddenly the quadcopters or the AI-enabled drones come out and they destroy your airfields. Or they take out your military headquarters, or they just, land at the Raisina, or for example, just to make that symbolic thing. I mean to say, it just completely changes the game.
I agree. I think every aspect of every war is studied very, very closely by us. And we will continue to study this. We will continue to see how we can best utilize it. And we will continue to make sure that we also adapt our defense systems to ensure that we do not get involved, or that we are able to find out these kind of vehicles if this was to happen to us, and we could also use this to target our enemies. So every aspect of war will be studied, Karthik, in very great detail. And I agree, it's a great innovation. War brings about innovation by nature, and every war is studied for its innovation so that we can use it for the next war. So these are great lessons for us also, Karthik. That's very well brought out.
Yulia Sirko also joins me. Let me just inform my viewers that she's Member of Parliament and Deputy Head in Transport Infrastructure, part of the Infrastructure Committee. Madam, I had taken this question to Vlada Galan. Putin is immune to the democratic pressures. He stays there. He's like Xi Jinping. He's like Kim. There is no pressure on him. And you are dealing with a person who has a long sense of history. He has seen Barack Obama, he has seen Biden, he's seen Trump, both the presidents. So you are dealing with a person with a long view of the history, madam.
Yes, that's why this time he will see Ukrainians. And I think it will be his last destination. So probably we are the only nation who can kick him out, and we will do as much as we can. I think bringing war to his territory, to Russian territory, very important. So civilians and military will realize this is a real war, and will also evaluate their real capacity. Because before 2022, they were second biggest and strongest army in the world. Now they are actually not at all. I think they are not at all the strongest army. So, and this is a lesson for other nations. So the warfare changed, the technology changed. This is a war of pace and cost also. And that's why India, as far as I know, actually financed 400 million for the recent development and production of drones. And this is a very right move and step. And we as a country who have practical, so to say, implementation of drone attacks, and we understand what is the modern warfare, we can share our experience, and happy to do it with other nations.
Okay, and
protect democracy.
Okay.
Because we are protecting democracy. We're protecting our families, and we don't need Russia, their territory, and their nation. That should stay away from our homes.
Okay, Vlada, let me take the closing comment. The Russians are in possession of the Crimean Peninsula. They are in possession of parts of Ukraine. So what sort of a peace can be brought about when you have enemy which has already created a corridor, sort of a buffer inside your own country?
The way that the Russians have always operated is in the hope that we will get fatigued, like with the territory that they seized in 2014, Crimea, and that we will not continue to push forward. This war was where we drew a line in the sand, in a very tough line. This attack continues to show that we will not back down. The Ukrainian people will not back down. And this is going to end here. Russia's going to end here, and there's going to be an end to this conflict. There is a huge question that we cannot deny that remains about the territories. It's going to be very, very difficult to get those territories back, and especially looking at some of the regions that are, much closer to Russia. They continue to pose false arguments of a threat to Russian speakers. This is false. I am a Russian speaker. I come from a city and was born in a city that was always a Russian-speaking city for many years. This is just a false argument. But at the end of the day, it's going to take force. We have to continue the pressure. And the exact reason is because if not, we will have a continuation of them coming on the land, a continuation of seizing territory like we saw with Crimea, with Lugansk, with Donetsk. It has to stop here, and it doesn't stop this way. It continues to stop by putting up force and pressure to the Russians.
Thank you all of you for joining me, and I really hope and pray that this costly war, this costly conflict comes to an end, because ultimately the people in Ukraine are suffering. So this was on point one. In the second on point, we'll look at how former Union Minister Salman Khurshid hit out at critics, questioning the members of the all-party delegation on Operation Sindhu, but after a short break.
मम्मी से नॉन डाइन समर अंडा तो हर सीजन में सुपर हिट है।
सुपरस्टार है ये, सर्दी हो या गर्मी, संडे हो या मंडे।
नया बिरला ओपिस
हमेशा वाला लगाना चाहिए था।
नए बिरला ओपिस वाटर प्रूफिंग की क्रैक प्रूफ टेक्नोलॉजी सीलन से बचाती है। इनको जमाने से पीछे चलने दो। आप चुनना नया बिरला ओपिस।
To be successful in chess, it's about 99% tactic and 1% strategy.
My skills are high enough in chess that even if I make a couple of bad moves, I might still get away with it.
You are fiercely competitive in nature. You go there to decimate your opponent, but you come across as a typical good boy that every mother would like to have in their son.
But it doesn't mean you're not raging inside. Or equally, euphoric.
So you're deceptive that way.
I think if you probe most people, they will be like that.
37 years back, you single-handedly broke the Soviet wall.
People who observe chess think we're in a lot more control than we actually are.
Do you think that chess would face any kind of threat with the advent of AI.
Computers have been much stronger than us for at least 25 years. There's no stopping it, so we might as well accept it.
Watch Radico Presents Duologue with Paruntas, Season 3, featuring